Should lobbyists be subjected to stricter campaign finance rules? New York is considering that. We'll talk about it. This is Nuance. I'm Mike Scala. I am an attorney, the chair of Queens Defenders, counsel for the Queens Link, and a hip hop artist. I should throw in Queens County committeeman. I recently updated my bios, and it's hard sometimes to fit all your stuff in there, right? Like they only give you a limited amount of space. I'm trying to figure out what to prioritize, and sometimes I just say I'm Mike Scala, I'm an attorney, because I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I don't know what to focus on, but these are some of the things that I do. I'm joined by Timid, also known as Jay Carter, also someone who does a lot of things, right? He is a hip hop artist, MC, he's an MC, he's a chair of BLM Tokyo. What's going on, Jay?
Um, just got back the day before yesterday from the DMC. So, I kind of missed the scene a little bit. So it was a good it was good to get out and step into that. So, but now I'm kind of sitting here with a sore throat, which sucks.
Oh man, so is that a direct result of your trip? Do you think you caught something on the way?
I don't think so.
Mm.
So, I hadn't been sick in like 5 years. No cold, no flu, nothing like that. And then all of a sudden, about 3 months ago, I got a sore throat, and it felt like a little bit of a flu type of thing. And ever since then, my throat has been, even though it went away, my throat has felt a little strange, right? A little off. And then last month, I got a sore throat again, and then again that went away, and then again it felt a little bit off. And I think it's just whatever this is, some recurring thing. It's yeah, it's no bueno.
Yeah, I mean, I was just talking about how here in New York, and you can tell me if you've experienced that in Japan, we kind of don't have seasons anymore. It was hot. It was hot here up until about last week, and now it's cold. Like we went from having to use the AC to the heat, like summer to winter. There's no fall and no spring anymore. It's just either hot or it's cold now. Is that happening in Japan?
Not cold. It's this kind of a fall. Yeah, I had to break out my hoodie on the trip to Tokyo. Like I wasn't going to originally. I had my, short sleeves packed up and ready to go, and then I was like, you know what? Let me take a hoodie just in case. And as soon as I got off the train in Tokyo, it was cold. I was like, oh dang, I got
Yeah.
to put this hoodie on.
Now you recently became a driver in Japan, right? Have you ever made that drive between Totori and Tokyo?
No, I have not.
Okay.
Um, I think it's a 6 to 8 hour drive,
I
maybe.
looked it up at once. I think, yeah, the train trip is a lot quicker than the drive. I believe the drive was like 8 hours. The train was like six.
Right. So
Yeah.
the train is 5.5, and
Okay.
that's
That's
with
not bad.
that's with transfers.
All right.
No, it's not bad at all. It's a very, very easy ride. Um, there is a plane, which is about a
All
90-minute
right.
flight,
Like an hour.
and
Yeah.
and then there's I don't know if they still have it. They used to have. I think they do. It's a night bus trip from here to Tokyo, and that's like 10 hours.
Ooh,
Yeah,
10
but
hours. Okay.
it leaves at night, and you get there early in the morning. I've never ridden that one, but I know
Okay.
people who have taken it.
So are you doing a lot of driving since getting your
No,
license? Oh,
no, not at all. I only got it just to because the rules were about to change, and I realized that I had only learned that there was this special program for certain states that had agreements with the Japanese government,
mm,
and so just so happens my license was one of them, and I was just like, oh, really? So you don't have to take any written test or driving test. You can just like give a paperwork, and then they, give you a license off of it. So, well, they're about to change it October 1st. Well, let me go ahead and knock it out. Why not?
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
See, if it was me, I'd be driving everywhere. It's just the kind of thing that I'm into, right? Like I just love exploring and feeling free on the road, especially in areas I haven't really been to before, right? Like if I was in a different country, I would be driving throughout that whole country, checking things out.
I'll hop on the train. Yeah, I've been a lot of places in the country, a lot of
Yeah.
train rides. The driving, I don't like long drives, you know.
Yeah. See, I
I,
do.
I'll fall asleep in a car in a minute, even if I'm driving.
Yeah, no, I mean, if it's that bad for me, that's when I'll stop and get a Red Bull, right? If I'm about to fall asleep. But Nah, I love long drives. And for me, the drive is the destination, right? Really, it's about
Mhm.
being on the road, checking things out. It isn't like I'm trying to get to a place and I can't wait till I'm there. No, like I talk about this all the time. When I drive to Florida, people say, why don't you fly? I'm like, because I like driving to Florida more than I like being in Florida. I'm not trying to get to Florida. I'm trying to experience the road to Florida.
See, I'm the opposite of that. Like if I'm getting in a car
Mhm.
for a trip, I want to be there already. Like the ride is not what I'm interested in at all. And so like an 8 hour car ride is like torturous for me.
Really?
But an 8 hour plane ride is nothing. An
See,
eight
and I'm
hour
nervous.
train ride is
I'm
nothing.
I'm the complete opposite. I'm so nervous about flying over to Asia because I haven't been on a plane for that long, and I'm afraid I'm going to be
Yeah.
claustrophobic and frustrated. And with a car, you can stop whenever you want, right? If you feel in a certain way, you can take a rest. You can pull over, go to a restaurant, go to a mall, check out how a local town is, how people are living, check things out. Go to a rest stop for a while. So you can do whatever you want, right?
No,
Stop, go. It's your own schedule, your own pace, your own time. And so you're in control of the trip. When you're on a plane,
absolutely.
you're stuck in that cabin with other people, and it's just you're just like cooped up with them all, and you can't get out. And I don't know. That's not the kind of way I like to travel. I think I'm a little nervous to have to be there, in a confined space for that long without having any kind of control over what's going on.
No, I mean it makes perfect sense. But for me it's for some reason in the car, it's just like, oh, Jesus Christ, this is nonsense. But if I did the same trip, on a train, yeah, no biggie.
All right, so we're going to talk about the lobbying reforms that the state is considering putting into effect as it relates to campaign finance. But before we do, why don't you give us an update or an overview of your trip? Because you said you went to Tokyo for what, the DMCs, was it?
Right. So yeah, Techniques DMC World DJ Championships, they hold them every year, where DJs come from all over the world that have competed and won their regionals to, take home the I think there's like a plaque, and then one of the competitions there's a ring, and then they get the DMC jacket, and they go up there and display these incredible turntable skills. So this was the first time that it was held in Asia, and so it was in Tokyo. And it's kind of interesting because Japan has had a number of DMC champions, so it was a good look. You think, okay, it's about time it came to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So it was cool. It's been haven't been in a event in the scene in a while. So
Right.
it was good to kind of be out in the middle of it, and the beats are booming, the DJs are cutting up, that vibe is there. So yeah, it was really good.
So were there any American DJs too, or was it just Japanese DJs?
No, no, no. This is from all over the world. And
Oh,
that was one thing that struck me too, because I mean, I know hip hop it's that type of, right? It's a global participation in the culture. But it was just, I don't know, it just struck me kind of a little bit of an awe moment because the DJs like on stage in one of the battles, it was what was it? I think it was Brazil versus New Zealand. And then you had other competitors from France. You had one girl from the Middle East, and she won the Middle East regionals. She was just 13 years old. She was crazy on the cut. Um, and then, there was a DJ from Russia, the US, the UK, and I'm standing there. I was in the VIP section on the second floor, and right in front of me, there were they were guys from China. They were all talking, so it was just like really dope that it's like, yeah, this is where things come together, in the
right.
arts. Hip hop brings a lot of people together, but the arts in general brings, these are people from all different kinds of cultures that come through. And this is, I mean, DMC DJs are not only hip hop, but it's basically comes out of hip hop culture. So for them to come together in that was, it kind of struck me with like an awe moment briefly.
Hmm. Okay, and who
Just
won?
a recognition, you know what I mean?
Which country produced the winner?
Well, there were three battles. Um, at least on the day that I went, there were three battles. So they had the world supremacy. Hold up, I got notes, bro.
It's
Um,
serious business. We
it
got
was
no.
serious business, yo. It was serious business. So they had the battle for supremacy, and DJ Raylon from Brazil won that. He took
Not to be confused with Ray Gunn, the Australian breakdancer.
No, not at all. This guy was dope with his skills. Although the second place winner, K Swizz from New Zealand, I thought should
Mm.
have won. I thought he got robbed, but Then there was the scratch battle, and that was won by DJ Oasis from France with the Japanese DJ Keita coming in second. And then for the classic, now the classic was a 6 minute routine round, right? So they each DJ would go on and do a 6 minute routine round. And DJ Fumi from Japan took that, and then K Swizz came in second on that. And then the kid RC3 from the USA came in third.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so this is only for DJ competitions, right? Do they have any other elements of hip hop on display?
No, this was DJs, strictly DJs. And then they had some performances of some DJs that came out and did their routines. Um, what was it? What else was on there?
No
Um,
MCs rocking?
no MCs. DJ Babu was one of the hosts.
Okay.
DJ Qbert was in the cut. Um, so on the main stage they had where the battles were taking place, they had the battles going on, the big huge screen in the background, so you could no matter where you're at, you could see what was going on. But then off on the side there was another sub bar area, and in there DJs were also spinning. Like maybe some of the competitors were doing like a short set in there.
Hmm. Nice.
So yeah. So it was good. Yeah, it was nice. You know.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, sounds like a good event. It kind of reminds me of those old Scribble Jam days, except for Scribble Jam, it wasn't just for DJing, right? They had the MC battle, the graffiti, the breakdancing, that everything, even beatboxing at some point. And so they were trying to just do all the elements of hip hop in one big
Then the
fest.
music video. Remember the last one? They had the music video
Oh
competition.
yeah, yeah. Too bad we couldn't have put handcuffs in there. It was a little before handcuffs.
Yeah, I put what did I put in there? Let Freedom
That
Ring, I
Freedom
think.
Ring, yes, you
Yeah,
did.
yeah,
You
yeah.
did. Yeah.
So, but yeah, so it was good.
You know what? We need more stuff like this. I know the DMC has been going on for a minute, but we need more of this all over the world. I mean, even in New York, you would think, right? New York being the mecca of hip hop, there would still be live hip hop going on all the time. It's not like it used to be. It really isn't. And I think there's a gap that needs to be filled, right? Because I think there would be a lot of people who would appreciate something like
Yeah,
that, even if like a regular event, like kind of like how it used to be, right? There used to be events every night, damn near, in New York City at the Bowery Poetry Club, at
right,
some of the bigger ones as well, like SOBs. SOBs will still do events, but those tend to be bigger shows with artists selling more expensive tickets, right? But some of
right.
the more, I don't want to say authentic, but street level, I guess, hip hop, right? Some like new cats coming up or more than underground stuff would be at these smaller venues, but there would just be so many. Like you could bounce from show to show to show to show on like a Thursday night randomly in New York City, right? That's kind of gone. You know what I mean? That's just that the
Yeah,
scene isn't what it was. And I don't think it's just with hip hop. You hear about that with stand up comedy. Like a lot of things have kind of been scaled
yeah,
back over the past few years, right? But
yeah.
I don't know. I think, especially in a place like New York, there would be a lot of energy for that, right? I think a lot of people
There
would
should
embrace
be
that.
there should be a Scribble Jam, a yearly Scribble Jam type event in New York City.
Right. Right.
Like it just would seem like it'd be the place for it. It'd be right.
Sure. Sure. I mean, they just opened up the hip hop museum in the Bronx, but yeah, I think there should be more live entertainment. It's funny to say that, right? Because in New York, maybe we were spoiled in the past, right? There was always something going on in the city. Yeah. When was there not live entertainment of any genre, right? Of any variety going on in the city? It was
Right,
just
right,
always
right.
there. That was like a big benefit of living in New York and getting to go to Brooklyn or Manhattan and seeing these shows all the time. And you just don't hear about them as much anymore. Not saying it never happens, right? But it's just fewer and far between, right? It just used to be everywhere, and it's just not anymore.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy.
What were some of the other venues? You remember? I know the Bowery was a big one. Um, there were some of the other ones that we even performed at a bunch of times, right? That you just see repeatedly. I forget the names of them now. Like not the big SOB joints, but some of the smaller ones.
Um, um, uh, what was it? Something knitting factory.
Yes, I was thinking about that. The Knitting Factory was a big one.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Then you had the lounges too. Remember, like, Randy and Winter would throw these showcases at places like Lizard Lounge and just, some of these like bar lounges.
Creek in the Cave.
Creek in the Cave in Queens. Yeah, that was a big one that we did a
Yeah,
few
yeah.
times. Yeah. There was a place called, it's not even there anymore. It was called Side Street Lounge and it was on Park Queens. So we did a show there. You know,
Right.
yeah. We did a lot of shows throughout the city, throughout the boroughs, not just in Manhattan or Brooklyn, right? We did Queens. Well, we did. Were you there when I did a show on Staten Island? I think I'm not sure if you were there for that one.
I don't
I
think
did
so.
at least one on Staten Island, and I'm pretty sure we performed in the Bronx as well. I think we hit all the boroughs.
Yeah, there was a collective out of the Bronx. I forgot what was in it. I went up there, but I don't remember exactly what the name was.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it was connected with Rebel Diaz and that crew.
Okay. End of the week used to run every single Sunday,
Are they
right?
still running?
I don't think so. I think during COVID they went to Zoom stuff, and I don't think they ever really resumed
Uh,
as a weekly open mic night. That used to be an open mic night in New York City, but you would get not just open micers, so to speak, right? You would get even some bigger names come through and rock at EOW. It was called EOW, and it was just like a spot where hip hop congregated on Sunday, right? And so,
yeah,
when I talk about some of these shows being smaller, it isn't only quote unquote no name artists performing there. I mean, some of the more well known established artists would still be at these small spots too. It's just kind of like
right.
more accessible, right? It wasn't like the big stage where you paid a big ticket price and you couldn't really interact with the artists as much. This was like a more intimate kind of venue, right? Where you would get your no names, but you would also get some more established artists kind of commingling and just all getting down for hip hop. That's kind of missing.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Yeah.
So
All right. Well, speaking of too bad, or maybe not too bad, lobbyists, right? Lobbyists are
that's too bad. Too
too
bad.
bad for the lobbyists. They're being scrutinized more lately, right? And there's an effort to make the rules on them stricter as it relates to campaign finance. And so I was just thinking about this as we went on the air, Jay. What do you think of when you hear the word lobbyist? Like, what kind of comes to mind?
It's a very negative image.
Right?
You know, someone that's trying to push an agenda and probably doesn't have, probably has like nefarious purposes behind it. So it's not a good image.
It has a negative connotation, and I think it's just become one of those things,
A,
kind of like how
a
we
lot
talk.
of because of the corporate, I think it's the corporate lobbyists that do it. I mean, there's
Sure,
obviously there are other lobbyists, right, that lobby for rights and for things like that. But then you get the
yeah,
corporations that lobby for.
for all kinds of things. I just think it became like one of those words that people started to use as a way to scapegoat, right? You blame others for your problems, right? That's very popular. It's a popular theme in politics, right? We see it with immigrants, we see it with corporations, billionaires, right? There's just certain buzzwords that people use. Lobbyists. It's kind of like a way of appealing to people who want to feel, or they feel frustrated, but they want to be able to place that frustration, place that blame on someone else. They want to point the finger somewhere. And I think lobbyist is kind of an easy scapegoat because people don't really know much about them or what they are. Or I mean, how many people can say they personally know lobbyists? Maybe they do, but maybe their friends who are lobbyists won't describe themselves that way because of the connotation. I don't know. But it's just like one of those things like where, like those lobbyists are out to get us. And, but it's also kind of empty rhetoric, right? Because lobbyists could be anybody, as we're saying.
Yeah, but I think, I would probably think they kind of earned that negative reputation because of the ones that are out front, the ones that are making some of these corporate
Maybe
lobbying plays.
corporate lobbying. I mean, and I think there's definitely a legitimate discussion to be had about reforms, and that's what we're going to get into, right? But even before we get into the nuance of that discussion, I kind of just wanted to talk broadly about what do we think of when we hear lobbyists, right? I know I personally had a negative opinion, right, of lobbyists because of just the way that it's talked about in the media and in politics, right? All these lobbyists, but what are they really? Literally, they're they're people who are in the lobby, right, of the legislature, of Congress or at the state level, they're in the lobby and they go to you when you're
What's your
about to
quick
go into the chambers to make a vote, right? And they say, we think you should support this or not support this. Obviously, they aren't only in the lobby. They'll contact you through other means now. They'll email you, they'll call you, they'll stop at your office. But that's kind of where it originates. And it quite literally did happen, right? When I was working in Albany, every time we went, we would walk from the office building to the chambers, right, to the Senate chambers. We would walk through, we would pass the lobby outside of the chambers, and there would be people who would approach us saying, hey, you guys are going to vote on such and such bill. We think you should support it or not support it. And it was kind of funny because it was happening at the last minute often, right? Like you're literally on your walk to make the vote and people approach you and they say, vote against that, vote for that for these reasons. It's like, maybe we should have had this meeting last week or a couple of days ago, not when we're actually on our way to vote.
Yeah, I think it's when they're putting money behind it and
Mhm.
trying to influence policy changes to get people to vote on certain
But that's
things,
their
like that's
job. But that's their job, right? And so there are people who work for organizations who serve as lobbyists, right? But it's just their job to try to convince legislators to vote a certain way to further their interests.
yeah.
So on its face, I don't see why that is a problem, right? If you
Well, it's
have
the money in politics. That's the
speak on that. What do you mean?
Well, it's the money in politics. I think, that corporations are putting massive amounts of money behind the lobbyists and trying to influence politicians to vote certain ways. And
So you said corporations. What if it's because oftentimes it would be a not-for-profit corporation, but they would often have a lobbying arm, right? And sometimes it's done with a different entity, a different legal entity. Oftentimes, the nonprofit is allowed to lobby. If it's a 501c3, they're not allowed to support or oppose a candidate or get involved in campaigns directly, in a way that's not neutral, but they can support their causes. So, for example, the Queens Link, right? We're trying to restore transit on the Rockaway Beach line, right? You would consider that a form of lobbying if we were to go to our local legislators, as we do, and say, when it's time for the budget to be passed, we think you should include Queenslink in the city's funding or the state's funding, right? That's a form of lobbying. But I don't think that's
sure.
done in a nefarious way. And when you say it's a corporation, okay, it's a 501c3 not-for-profit corporation, but it's not the kind of corporation people are thinking of that have, billions of dollars that they're trying to put money into politics. It's kind of a grassroots corporation.
Right. Well, I think when people think about it, they're thinking about these multinational types of
Yeah.
corporations that
Yeah.
have these deep billions of dollars, and they're trying to lobby for certain bills to be voted on in certain ways that benefits their business and
Over. Yes. Right.
doesn't
Yes.
necessarily help the people, or
I,
maybe
I
it
agree
even
with you.
purposely hurts the people. And I think that's the
Right.
image.
That's the
Uh,
connotation. But I'll say I didn't experience much of that personally when I worked in Albany. And maybe it's a little bit different when you look at the congressional level versus the state legislature, right? I don't know. But it was mostly people from unions or people from not for profits, or sometimes it would be something like Resorts World, for example, right? The casino that's close to here, right? They had a lobbying
is
arm.
that Nas's joint?
Right. They would come in and they would say, we think you should vote to legalize online poker or something like that. You know what I mean? Because it helps
Yeah. Woo,
because it
yeah. Let's
because
go.
it helps their business. But that was kind of the extent of what you would see, right? I didn't really get too many and I guess maybe again because this would relate more to a federal thing, but I didn't get like multinational oil companies coming in saying that we should get rid of environmental regulations, right? That wasn't the kind of thing
Right.
that I would see. It would be more like, grassroots type activism usually. Or
Right. Right.
unions were a big one, right? Unions wanted you to, for example, vote on legislation that would improve collective bargaining rights or help their workers in some way. They had
Right.
very strong lobbying arms. Oh, here's another example, a major one. The hotel industry had a big lobby and they would be pushing back against Airbnb a lot. But Airbnb also had their lobbyists, right? And they'd be trying to push
Yeah.
their business. And so they would be at each other's throats. And yeah, it'll be like, you're walking through, one guy wants you to do one thing, one guy wants you to do something else. And they're kind of like yelling at each other through you type thing, one in each ear. So I mean, that was
Yeah.
something you would see.
Yeah. I think, I mean, of course, people are going to push to try to get certain things passed, but
Mhm.
I think that the thing that people are tired of, and that's really gives that negative, is those corporations trying to change rules and regulations to the
Mhm.
detriment of people
Detriment.
just for a profit.
Right. No, I agree with that. But I think that when people talk about lobbyists, they kind of put everyone, all lobbyists, in that same bucket when,
Yeah,
not
sure.
seeing that. To me, it's just someone who works for an organization, and maybe they're freelancing, right? But they're hired by some kind of organization to support policy that helps that organization, right? The policy that that organization is advocating for on its own, right? These organizations often get formed, like we said, using the Queens Link as an example. That organization is formed for the purpose of furthering that particular policy, right? In particular, transportation along that corridor with room for park space as well. And so obviously, everything that it's doing is somewhat considered lobbying, right? To some degree. I mean, obviously, there are other elements too, like information to the community. All right, that's not lobbying legislature. But when you're dealing with the politicians, people in office, yeah, you're lobbying them to support your cause,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, there are rules already, right? There are regulations on lobbyists, but the question is, do they need to be stricter? Now,
Yes.
you're saying yes, they do? Okay.
Yeah. I don't even know what they are, but yes, they need to be stricter.
So there is reporting now that the New York Ethics Commission is considering expanding the regulations on lobbyists as they relate to campaign finance. Now, they do in New York, there is an obligation on lobbyists to report that they are lobbyists, right? They have to register, kind of like a sex offender, right? They have to register as lobbyists and let everyone know that they're lobbying. But the question is, should there be more of a restriction on them? And there is some discussion here about, everything from making them give more information about their lobbying activities to outright banning lobbyists from making campaign contributions to candidates in New York. So, kind of like on that sliding scale, where do you think you would draw the line? Do you think they should be banned outright from giving money to campaigns because there's a concern that the candidates will get elected and feel like they owe the lobbyist? Or should it just be a more transparent process?
Yeah, I think they should be banned from giving money
They
to the
should be banned.
campaigns.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think lobbyists should be giving uh, campaigns money. It's a big conflict of interest that I think it's just heading things in the wrong direction.
Well, there is something I wanted to say this. So in New York City, if you are doing business with the city of New York, you can make a contribution to a city campaign. However, your contribution is not matched with matching funds, right? We know in New York City is a very robust, and even in the state now, a robust matching funds program where in New York City, they'll give you 8 to 1. And it used to be 6 to 1, right now it's 8 to 1. So think about that. If someone gives you $50, right, and they meet certain criteria, like they're a New York City resident, they get their contribution matched 8 times. So 50, you really have to times it by 9, right? Because if you times it by 8 plus the original contribution, right? So 50 times 9 would be $450, right? So 50 turns into almost $500. It's a big jump. And if you do business with the city, you can give money, like we said, but it's not matchable. And so that's an attempt to curb that influence, right? Because all right, your $50 is just $50. It's like saying they have a right to support the candidate they want to support, but we're not going to multiply that with taxpayer money because they're doing business with the city, and we recognize that could be a conflict. And so I'm wondering if maybe that's something we might want to look into here. Like, if you're a lobbyist, you can give money, but it's not matchable, and you don't get the certain benefits that other people who aren't lobbyists do get.
Yeah, I definitely would prefer there'd be the money taken out of it.
Mhm.
If you're pushing for something, yeah, but there shouldn't be the possibility of in possibly influencing politicians by cutting huge checks to campaigns or to
Well, yeah,
causes that they're interested in.
and that's always an interesting debate, right? Because I think there's a lot of cynicism in that idea that basically you can't trust someone to make a decision on the merits. They're always going to make a decision based on favors or on who gave them money, or we think that they're more likely to, I guess, right? We're saying that we don't trust, so in other words, if we allow lobbyists to give money and we say, listen, you can give money, campaigns can receive the money, but we're trusting that you're not going to make a decision that's influenced by that, right? That would be one thing. But what we're saying is we don't trust y'all at all, so that we have to make it illegal for the money even to be given, because we think that once that door is open, people are just going to be making decisions based on that as opposed to the merits, right? So it's
I
like
think
kind of like the cynical view of things.
I think history has shown us that the that's how it will play out. We've seen where, there's too much money in politics.
Right.
I mean, everybody, both sides have been screaming that for, 30 years now. There's too much money in politics.
Sure.
Um, but nothing's really changed on that front. And
Well,
we see
the
that,
matching funds program, right? The campaign
okay,
finance, I do think that that does help with that issue.
right. So I think, we all agree. I
Yeah.
think that's one thing a lot of people can agree. There's too much influence, money influence in politics. And so, yeah, I think we see that when people are left without stricter rules on them, what they're going to do with it. So,
Yep. You froze. Okay. So yeah, I got a couple questions on that. Number one, I think we do want to keep in mind that there are constitutional rights at play here, right? Namely, supporting someone you want to support with your money. We may not like it, but that has been looked at as a form of speech by the Supreme Court, right? So are we prepared to say that we're going to restrict someone's expression, if you will, right? Their free speech, their right to associate, however you want to look at it, by amplifying someone's message with their dollars, right? So are we willing to potentially restrict their First Amendment rights here because we think that there's an overriding concern of corruption, right? Just based on the fact that they're lobbyists and they're giving money to a campaign.
I mean, don't we have to, even though the the right may be there for that, that's their speech, don't we often weigh free speech against a greater
Sure.
responsibility or a greater, downside?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Absolutely. But I think that weight, right, that analysis that you're doing needs to take into account the fact that free speech is a very crucial part of our Constitution, right? When we talk about constitutional rights, well, the First Amendment is first for a reason, right? That free speech is really at the
sure,
heart of what we think of as, as our American rights, right? Our
sure,
constitutional
sure.
rights. So you do need to have very compelling reasons to restrict it, right? And this would be a restriction of free speech also because this would be a governmental restriction, right? The government is saying that a
Right,
lobbyist couldn't do this. So it would be a law imposed upon them, right? That they wouldn't be
right.
allowed to give their money. So, in that sense, you would be dehumanizing them, I guess, right? You would be saying that we're looking at you more in terms of your lobbying transactions than we do as your, we're looking at you more in terms of that than in terms of as a person who has a right to participate in the democratic process.
Yeah, I think, you know, there should be a distinction as far as someone personally participating in the democratic process versus organizations, right?
He's a lobbyist for organizations potentially, or maybe they work for themselves, but they have different clients.
Yeah, I think it's like a loophole type of thing, right? If you're lobbying for your personal thing, that's one thing, but
Oh, so
organizations
where would you
funding.
draw that line? So it wouldn't be just all lobbyists; it would be certain lobbyists.
No, I think it would be all lobbyists that are lobbying, for organizations, these especially when there's money-backed organizations. Like, charity organizations may be a little bit different to look at,
Yeah,
but when you're lobbying for something that's going
yeah.
to
Okay.
financially
You
benefit
would
your
look at it,
corporation.
right? Right. Yeah. So I was thinking about that, like Queens Link, for example. You know, we may not have a registered lobbyist who works for us, but let's say we did, and they would be on the payroll, and their job would be to try to make sure that Queens Link is supported by our elected officials. Would you say then that they would be outright prohibited from making a contribution to any political campaign?
Mm, probably.
Mm, okay. Now,
I
what if,
just
yeah,
I think we've seen just too much monetary influence that, we already see people just aren't going to act right. I mean, they're just not. It's just what's happening. And until we're mature enough to deal with it, there
right.
may need to be some of these things in place because what we're doing now isn't working. And
So,
everybody agrees.
yeah, but it doesn't mean everyone agrees that we should make these changes, so sweepingly, like you're just going
Sure,
to,
sure, sure.
you know what I mean? But it's an interesting discussion. I'm just trying to figure out, where that line would be drawn. So I'm just assuming then this would only apply, in your opinion, to people who are registered as lobbyists, right? Like, let's say Queensland again doesn't have someone who works for us as a lobbyist or is hired to be a lobbyist, but the individual people, like, Rick Horan, the president of the organization, myself as counsel, someone else who was a volunteer for Queenslink, but they're very close to the organization, let's say as a hobby, right, or as something that they just believe in as a citizen, they go and they lobby the legislature, right? They're not paid
Right,
to do it. No one's paying them for it, but it's what they believed in, and they go and they say, hey, Senator Sanders, or Senator Anderson, make sure you don't forget, Stacey Fefer-Amato, don't forget to put Queenslink in the budget. Don't forget to fight for Queenslink when you're up there in Albany working on the budget. Would you then ban them from making contributions to these elected officials, even if they aren't registered as lobbyists? They're not being paid to do it, but they're doing it because they believe in the cause.
yeah, I think it's a tricky one there, right? Because it's again, it sounds like a loophole. It's not really the organization lobbying for it. It's individuals.
But they're
Um,
on behalf of the organization. Like if I went to Senator Sanders, as I do, right, as counsel to the Queens League, you can go on my YouTube page and listen to some of the stuff. I'll talk
right,
to our local elected officials and I'll say, let's get this budget letter out and make sure we get the signatures from everyone on it so that when the budget comes down, Queenslink is included in it. All right. So I'm lobbying in that sense. Again, I'm not getting paid to do that. It's not my job, right? I'm not compensated at all financially for it, but it's because I
right.
believe in it. It's a personal cause that I
Yeah.
support. So would you then say I should be prohibited from making campaign contributions to anyone in the world? Like now because I've lobbied in that way, I can't give money to any candidate going forward.
Um, Off rip, I would want to say no, but also yes. I would have to look at how that would work out because you don't want the people, individuals to lose their
Right.
right to contribute. But you
Right.
also want to try to curb buying influence.
Sure. Right. Because I was going to say, would that have a chilling effect? We talk about chilling effect on free speech, right? If that was the rule, that if you do
Right.
any kind of lobbying, and we're going to define lobbying so broadly to include just, going to your local elected official and saying, I really hope that you keep this priority in mind. If you've done that, you then forfeit your right to contribute to any campaign going forward. I mean, would that dissuade
Yeah.
people from even talking to their elected officials?
Yeah. And elected officials might like that because people stop bothering them in the halls. Yeah, I mean
But when people
it
stop giving them money, here's a cynical take: when people then stop giving them money if they can no longer have an influence over them,
right.
and how would they get their
The,
re-elections funded?
yeah, I think it definitely would have to be worked out and talked out. Um, the main concern is always that they're using those donations to influence the politicians.
Yeah,
And so if there's a way that can be dealt with in a fair manner, then yeah, I think that's what we should go for. But it's like what we're doing now isn't working, and a lot of people aren't happy with how it is. So something has to change.
right. And that's what the commission is looking at, right? How to reform the system and how far to
Right.
go with these
Right.
reforms. So my second question, I said I had two questions. My second question on this is, and you just kind of touched on it. We all kind of agree that money has too much of an influence in politics, and that oftentimes contributions have too much say in terms of what gets done, even who gets a meeting. We saw that with the latest mayoral administration. There were at least accusations, right? I don't want to say that it was true or not, but people were complaining and alleging that you basically had to make a campaign contribution in order to get a meeting with the mayor, right? They wouldn't even give you the time of the day if you hadn't given them money. Now, these weren't
Yeah,
lobby,
that's not good.
these weren't all lobbyists, right? These were just people giving. Now, again, it goes back to how broadly we define the word lobbyists, right? Because
Right.
you're just a regular person on the street. You don't work for any organization that's trying to change policy, but maybe you believe in something. Maybe it could be something as local as what's going on your street, right? You're a homeowner, a renter, whatever, and you have a noise complaint, or maybe like here, our beach, cars are going too fast down the street because they're trying to get to the main avenue up there. And so there's a concern about safety on the street, right? Cars speeding. I'm not a big speed bump person, but some people say you should have that, or, different controls put in place to try to curb the speeding on the street. So this isn't lobbying in the way we typically think about it, but this is someone now who has a very localized concern and they want to go to their elected officials and bring it up, right? Kind of really, if you think about it, how our democracy is supposed to work, right? Our
Sure.
people are supposed to be able to bring their concerns to the elected representatives and present their case to them, and then the elected representative is supposed to make a decision on the merits, meaning not based on the relationship they have with the person, or if they did them a favor or have they're supporting them or not. Unfortunately, we're seeing too much of that, especially at the federal level now. But it's supposed to work on the merits, meaning they just decide on the basis of the idea itself, right? Is this a good idea or not?
Right.
And it shouldn't matter who's bringing it to their attention. So
Right.
that's how it's supposed to work. But we also have, as we know, a system where people have to run for office and they've got to get their message out there, and that costs money. And so people contribute money to these campaigns. You know, should we say that if you gave money to a campaign, you can no longer talk to your elected officials? And
No.
does this concern about possible corruption or favoritism or what have you, does this extend beyond lobbyists and just to anyone who makes a campaign contribution? I mean, at a certain point, don't we have to put a certain amount of trust in our elected officials to do their jobs in a way that's righteous and not corrupt, right? I mean, obviously we're all
Abs
cynical, but we're trying to elect the best candidates here. And I think part of that is picking someone who we think is going to make the best decisions for all their constituents, not just for who's giving them money, right? So I guess
Absolutely.
my point is whether a lobbyist is involved or not, I think there's always a concern at the end of the day that the elected official could make a decision that isn't based on the merits, that's based on other factors that are inappropriate. And
Right.
does that require us to write the laws in such a way that would make it impossible for them to do so, when it kind of seems like a fool's errand?
Yeah, but I think the example you just brought up where there was I don't know where the people wanted to meet with, I think it was, you said, the mayor, and
Yeah,
he wouldn't meet with them because they didn't contribute to his campaign.
allegedly.
That that shows that there needs to be something in place right there. That shows that he's
Yeah,
viable. That shows that
right.
he's
But is that,
influence.
yes. Now, of course, the administration,
That's a red flag to me.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Of course, the administration wouldn't come out and say that. No one's going to say, we'll only meet with you if you give us money. They know better than to say that. But on the other side, you have people who will say, hey, how come all these people are getting meetings and I'm not? They all gave money and I didn't. What's going on? I mean, people are calling that out.
Right.
So that is something that does come up. But isn't that, if that is true, isn't that a shortcoming of the mayor or of that elected official? Does that mean that the entire system is broken to the point where we're going to make it so that you basically can't give money anymore, or you can't even have meetings with the politician anymore if you gave money?
Yeah, I mean, it's 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 something that obviously needs to be done. Um,
Mhm.
you know, um, I don't think people, citizens should be restricted from having meetings with with their elected officials, um, if if they didn't campaign contribute to their campaign. That person is still their elected official, regardless if they contributed to the campaign or not.
Right.
They have that elected official has a responsibility to those people, whether they're in the same party or not, same whatever or not. So I don't think
Yes,
that yeah.
yes, but is the solution to flip that on its head and say, now we're going to say you cannot meet with them if you did give money because we're afraid of improper influence.
So yeah, that's a good point there. Um, I mean, yeah, but we do have to at some point. There is, a point of trust in the politician, and maybe we wouldn't need to put any of these extra restrictions or extended restrictions if the politicians that were bad actors were being held accountable
Mm,
um, for their actions.
right.
Because I think, I remember when the congressional campaign time we were looking at stuff, and even then, like it was like 14% of people disapproved of their congressperson, right? Or Congress, something like that. It
Yeah,
was very low.
Congress's approval rating was even down to like, yeah, like under 10% at a certain point, 9%.
Right.
Yeah.
But those people kept getting reelected. And
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
accountability is not there, and that's on the people for not holding them accountable. It's like if you
They would
already
blame the other Congress members, but they like their own.
right. So it's like if you think that they're doing bad, hold to hold them accountable is to not vote them back in. And I mean that's kind of how the system is supposed to work. And
Mhm.
in that case, if there were accountability in that way, then I think some of the politicians would probably um, be a little bit more trustworthy because they'd be trying to get back in.
Right.
If
It's
they can
always
get
hard.
by,
Yeah. It's sometimes just hard to draw the distinction. Like if you're really looking, because you can say, well,
sure.
follow the money, and it's good, right? Shine a light on all that stuff. More transparency tends to be a good thing. But I think there's also a danger that you might diagnose something as corruption that really isn't, because it's sometimes hard to know what people's motives are, right?
Right.
So, for example, if you would look at elected officials or at a candidate's campaign filings, right? You can go online and you can look at who gave them money and how much, and that's great. You might start to recognize a trend, or think you're recognizing a trend that speaks to corruption when maybe it speaks to common interest, right? For example, again, to go back to the Queen's link as an illustration, if I'm running for a local office, right, and everyone knows I'm a big supporter of the Queen's link, right, uh, it's natural that other people who support the Queen's link and better transit in their district would contribute to my campaign, would support my campaign. So if you look at my campaign filings, you might see a ton of people associated with Queen's link and other transit related groups, right? Because they say, oh yeah, if that guy gets elected, we know that he supports the same things that we do. That's why we support him, right? That makes sense. But I guess it's like a chicken and the egg kind of thing, right? Because then if you were to look at those campaign contributions later, and let's say I got into office and I was fighting for those things because that's what I believed in all along, someone might try to make the case that I'm only fighting for those things because all those people gave me money. When really they're not influencing my decision. It's just they supported me in the first place because they knew I would be a strong advocate of that thing. Right. So I think a lot of people who do give money to a candidate do so because they know that they're likely to favor what they believe in. Right. But then when they do it,
Sure.
there's a concern that they're going to get accused of corruption or something because now they're pushing that same thing those people want who gave them money, right? But that might not be the reason why they're pushing it.
Sure. I think, I mean, there would have to be, of course, other factors and there's other
Mhm.
information. Like if you were already on that talking point, then
Yeah.
it shows less. I think
Right.
it would raise less of a flag that you were being corrupted by their contributions.
Mhm.
You know, um, if you had a different talking point and then all of a sudden you get big contributions from someone and now you've changed your tune, I
Right.
think then there's a flag that you look at there and see what's going on
Right.
potentially.
Right. Like there was controversy over Mayor Adams and Turkey, right? And all this
Right.
money started coming in, right? And then I think we talked about this on Nuance before, where didn't he put
Yeah.
out a statement about the genocide in that part of the world or something like that? And it was kind of aligned with Turkey's interests. And it's like, well, why would he be speaking that way? It looked a little fishy that all these,
Right.
Turkish
And then there
people
was something
contributing to him.
Yeah, there was something with a Turkish diplomat or something too, if I remember right. I don't remember the exact details.
Yeah, and I think flights to Turkey and all kinds of stuff.
Something like all that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
yeah, you look at an accumulation of things instead of maybe just one specific thing. And I
Now
think there's
look,
always going to be
yeah.
loopholes. People are going to find ways around it, but
Well,
we definitely need to be more diligent in that regard.
yeah, and I was gonna say people are sometimes held accountable for it, right? So it's not fair to say no one ever does. Like our former council member here in Queens was indicted for allegedly being corrupted by some of this stuff, right? Do you know? I'm
Isn't
not going to
every
recount the
politician
indictment,
in
but
Queens that indicted?
no, but too many are. But
Yeah,
that's the point, though. Yes, on the one hand, it shows perhaps an alarming pattern of corruption, but on the other hand, it shows that people are being held accountable, right? It's not like everyone's getting
true,
away with
true,
it.
true. Right, right. So, yeah, I mean, I'm up for expanding the lobbying regulations and campaign finance issues. Um, were there anything
Okay.
specific that they proposed?
Yeah, so I'm looking at it right now, and again, this isn't their final recommendation. They're just speaking on what to do it right now, right? So there are different ideas being thrown around. There was the possibility of talking about prohibiting them from contributing altogether, but short of
Right,
that, there are also ideas to just require them to do more reporting, right? So more transparency
right.
measures. So
Which I think is good.
yeah, so they were talking about not just reporting that they are lobbyists, but exactly what they're lobbying on. And there was language
Right.
here that they suggested. Let's see if I can find that. This is a lot of stuff here.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's a lot of reporting. There's definitely a lot of reporting points
so
here.
what they're saying is they would expand the reporting obligations to require, and here are the additional things. They want to provide additional details on their lobbying activity, including details of time spent on each bill lobbied, in addition to the
Mm,
subject and individuals, or disclose not just what they are lobbying on, but the client's position on that legislative or regulatory proposal. So, more detail as opposed to just general information that they are lobbying.
hmm
Then,
It looks like a bunch of extra disclosures and reporting, which
yeah,
I don't think that's a problem.
well,
Although that's that first point that I guess is the really big one, right? Prohibiting or restricting campaign contributions from lobbyists or clients and preventing them for giving to public officials they've lobbied for.
sure. But there's still a concern about chilling speech as it currently is defined by the Supreme Court, right? Or just curbing or restricting someone's ability to take part in the democratic process. Because again, we started the discussion by saying, lobbyists are scapegoated, but they are also people, right? This is why I guess this tension exists. There are also people who do have rights, right? And they have a right
Are
to
they really people? Are
they
lobbyists really
have
people?
they have a right to be part of our democratic system. And so I would be concerned about chilling their ability to access democracy too much, meaning I'm but how granular are we going to get, right? We're talking about time spent on every bill and everyone you've ever approached. Like, I don't know. At a certain point, I can see like, and I'm trying to put myself in their shoes. Like, if I was working in that kind of job, would that discourage me from pursuing that kind of work if I knew I had to keep journals and report, every minute spent with every elected official? I mean, is that too much?
I don't know if it is. You know, it would just become par for the course. It just become part of the process.
Yeah.
I think, if a lobbyist is spending an inordinate amount of time with a candidate or an elected official, that could raise a red flag. Like, why are you so cozy? Why are you guys,
Mm.
you know,
That's true.
I think maybe, some of the expanded reporting could be implemented and see how it plays out and then adjust accordingly.
Okay. Okay, that is fair, right? And that would be, I guess, a bit of a compromise, right? Because it stops short of outright banning them from
Yeah.
making contributions. If you're banning them, then obviously they don't do all this reporting. I mean, maybe you might impose it on them, but they wouldn't be doing the reporting as a condition of giving the money. You'd be saying that they just can't give the money. So
The
maybe
question is,
they can
do
still
you
give the
trust
money,
the
but they got to do the
lobbyists?
reporting. Say it again.
Question is, do you trust the lobbyists to give accurate reporting?
Well, they would be well to do accurate reporting. Yeah, I mean, people could call them out on it. I guess.
Yeah.
I've seen that guy in the lobby 50 times. How come he said he's only been there twice? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's all interesting. We still have to kind of though, I think, draw a line as to okay, what even is a lobbyist, right? Because we said,
Yeah.
I think we said we don't want it to only be people who are registered as lobbyists now, that we want to broaden that definition a little bit. But we also, I think, seem to say that we don't want to consider everyone who talks to their elected official a lobbyist, right? So what makes you become a lobbyist?
Right. Maybe there's a you know, I don't know, maybe a financial interest.
Mm,
The larger the financial interest gives more scrutiny.
the more scrutiny, imagine that.
Right.
Imagine that.
And so if it's a citizen reaching out to the elected official, there's nothing, there is a cap on what they're doing. If you come from an organization and you've got like 100 employees and
Mm.
you're getting that big donation there, like maybe there should be something there looked at, you know. Um,
So in that case, the Queensland folks would not be considered lobbyists if they're all volunteers.
well, they could be considered lobbyists, but maybe they just it wouldn't be raising a red flag that much.
Gotcha, gotcha.
You know what I
That
mean?
actually could be an interesting way to formulate it, right? Like if you were to talk about outright banning them from making a contribution, maybe then you would look into, well, we're only talking about lobbyists who are like some heavy duty lobbyists making all this kind of money for these corporations here.
Yeah.
Could be something. Tier system.
Yeah. And see what the data looks like after that, because obviously there'll be the data that comes in from that extra reporting and those types of restrictions, and see if there's any influence happening or if there are red flags that need to be looked at or investigated. You
Right.
know,
And the
I
other
think who
thing I
would get,
wanted to, go ahead.
I was going to say real quickly, I think who would probably get caught in that, and I don't know if caught is the word, but who would definitely be affected would probably be labor unions,
Mm,
um, because they do have large financial backing and they do represent sometimes, thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, and they do make political contributions.
right.
So, you know, their efforts might be more scrutinized. Which I'm
Yeah.
not saying is a bad thing, but just saying
Mm.
that I could imagine that they would be one of those groups that would be, uh, fall into that category.
Yeah. Yeah. And you got to realize like a lot of candidates run their elections successfully because they're backed by organized labor, right? What does that mean? Union members often, and sometimes there's a tension between what the union leadership says and what the individual members want, right?
Right.
But you oftentimes see a structure where, let's say, a union endorses a candidate, then they contribute manpower to that candidate, right, in the form of their members, right? All of a sudden, 100 union members will be knocking on doors, making calls, and just being troops on the ground for that candidate. So it is a big part of our campaign infrastructure, right? Of the
Right.
apparatus, right, that you often see in a campaign. And so, yeah, that is something to think about, how affected unions, labor unions, could be by rules like this. So what effect is that going to have on campaigns? Because that's an example, I think, of the type of support, the type of influence we don't normally think of as being corrupt or nefarious, right? When we think of lobbyists, we don't usually think of union members. But,
Right.
if you're just looking strictly in terms of the activities, yeah, they might end up getting swept up in that definition.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So,
So it's something to consider. The last thing I wanted to ask about would be, you often hear people talking about time restrictions imposed on former elected officials becoming lobbyists, or people maybe lobbying for a certain number of years and then no longer officially being lobbyists, but that could be also exploited or thought of as one of those loopholes you were talking about, right? Like let's say someone is a former lobbyist or a
Right.
former elected official about to become a lobbyist, right? I mean, when we talk about restrictions on lobbyists, are we having some kind of look back window or even a look ahead window, right? To stop people from saying, well, I wasn't a lobbyist on the day I gave that dollar.
Yeah, I think it would probably need to be scrutinized.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, we're talking about the operations of the government here, you know what I mean? And these things affect millions of people.
Yeah.
We want everything to be on the up and up as much as possible. So, I think that should be on the table potentially. I'm sure there are different there are you know ways to do it that are probably more efficient and less cumbersome,
Yeah.
but that would just have to be worked out on the process.
And you realize that another concern here is you, in a way, and this doesn't just apply here, but with all these fancy regulations that we're trying to come up with here, like you're creating more red tape and more bureaucracy, and you may be
Yeah,
creating
yeah.
even more issues on the back end or different issues on the back end, right? You're trying to solve one problem, but you're creating other problems.
Absolutely. And that I think that this kind of comes with it
Mm-hmm.
because no matter what no matter what situation you put in place or process you put in place, there's going to be someone that tries to exploit it. And so if you make it easier, these big lobbyists with all this big money, they're gonna definitely take advantage of that to try to exploit it even further. If you make it
Mm-hmm.
more difficult, they're gonna look for the loopholes,
Right.
you know. Um, it just comes
Yeah.
with it.
Right. Right. These solutions or these efforts, I guess, are really meant to be a band-aid of sorts, or be like a temporary, right, be a measure that you put in place because the system isn't working the way we want it to be working, and we're trying to
Right.
do something about that to
Yeah.
stabilize the situation a little bit, right? Obviously we want to have a system where these things aren't necessary at all, but
Right.
we're not there, right? We would love to just be able to trust all of our elected officials to the point where we would be confident in saying, lobbyists, no lobbyists, listen, people can give them money, but they're not corruptible. They're going to take contributions from anyone, and they're not going to discriminate based on who gave them money or didn't, right? They're going to still make the best decision for all of us. We would love for that to be the case, but that is
Sure.
the world that we have, and there's, too much of a concern that the opposite is happening. And so sometimes these measures need to be put in place to try to counteract that, right? And
Right.
I think
And,
it's a good example of that, because we see this in different forms really throughout our system, right? I was having a conversation with someone last weekend, and they were saying that they would want all hiring decisions to be made strictly on the merits, right? And I said, I think everyone wants that to be the case. But when you start talking about affirmative action, right? MWBE, DEI, whatever you want to call it, you know, the end goal is still equality, right? It's just we don't. The idea is it's a recognition that we don't have that now, and something needs to be
right.
done, right, to try to hold us over until we can get there, to work towards that, and then maybe as you move closer towards that spot, you can lessen some of those restrictions, right, as they become less
Right.
necessary. But everyone, of course, wants equality. Everyone
Sure.
should be treated the same. Every decision to be made on the merits, right? But it's just that isn't the world that we live in, and so
Right. That's not what's happening.
right. So what do
Yeah.
you do to kind of push back against that as we try to progress towards that world?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's um it just says that, the rules are ongoing. Things change, things
Mhm.
grow, things adapt. We have to keep working the system. Nothing's going to be like set in stone specifically, or like, not everything will be.
Yeah.
Some things will be, malleable as the situation calls for. Um, I think Obama recently in one of the interviews, he was saying that, democracy has to be continually fought for. You have to
Right.
continually show up and put in that time. So I think it applies here as well. So you put something in place to see how it's working, to see if we're getting a better result for the people, something more fair, and you hold that until you find something better that makes that even better.
Yeah.
So the ultimate goal, like you said, is to have this fair system for it to basically uh, give off follow in on the promise that the system is, advertises itself as, for things to be fair, for things to be equal for people, for, all of those things. So
Right. And
you
that requires,
work
I
at
think,
it.
constantly checking in, constantly doing
Yeah, yeah, you constantly check in and do it.
reporting,
Yeah,
right? We want to look at actual data. And that's part of the conversation I was having over the weekend also, right? Like there's
yeah.
actual data you can look at, right?
Sure,
And
sure.
oftentimes it isn't a matter because this guy was saying, well, instead of trying to make sweeping policy changes, why not just point to the bad actors and try to weed them out? Sometimes it isn't that simple, right? Because
Right,
sometimes, like in the case of a hiring decision, I was trying to make this example. I said, if you look at someone who hired, right, like let's say the data is showing that uh, white men are being disproportionately hired for jobs, right? Even though the
right,
percentages of the population don't equal that, right? There's a disproportionate number of white men being hired. Now, it's
right,
hard oftentimes to look at each individual hire and be like, that was a racist hire or that was done, right? Because you don't know the motivations there. And maybe it wasn't, right? Maybe someone just had a good rapport or liked that candidate more, whatever the reason, they hired that person. So it isn't a matter of just pointing fingers and unless you can find something that's like, egregious,
hmm
right? Like some kind of blatant racism. Oftentimes you're not going to see that. Oftentimes just they happen to hire that person. All right. But it becomes a systemic issue when you look at the data, you look at the stats, and you're like, you can understand maybe each hiring decision was individually justified, but why is it that in the aggregate, this is the data that you're getting? That's why it's a systemic thing and it requires a systemic solution because it isn't always as simple as just pointing the finger at the bad person, right? It's the
right,
cumulative effect of what you're seeing, and that's a matter of data,
right,
looking at the facts, looking at the numbers, and really not relying on anecdotes or personal stories or right individual accounts, but looking at the totality of the circumstances.
right. I mean, it's the same thing. Like, when they were talking about, remember when there was the big argument over, stop and frisk,
Mm-hmm.
and they were talking about how effective it is and this and that, and then you look at the data, and the data said, well, 85% of the people were innocent of anything. Like,
Yeah,
so this
wasn't really
shows
80,
that this
was it
is,
like 88, 89? It was almost 9 and 10.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like the data says that people aren't being stopped because they're
Right.
suspicious. People are being stopped just because they're being stopped. And so
Right.
the data is telling you something completely different than what
Yeah.
maybe the mouthpieces are telling you about the process. And
Right.
so make those decisions based off of the data. And to collect that data, we have to monitor it. You have to have
Yeah.
reporting.
Yeah.
You have to,
Yeah, right. And I think the analogy here would be okay, maybe the mayor, for example, is saying, well, we're only meeting with people based on the merits. We're not meeting with them based on who gave money, and maybe they can even point to each individual meeting and say, well, this meeting was made because of this was made because of this. They try to justify it. That's one thing. But if you look at the data and you see that, oh, wait a minute, how
yeah,
come 99% of the meetings were with people that gave him money, right? That raises a red
right,
flag. That's data, right? That's different
right,
from what they're telling you, which each individual case was. That's the big picture, right? That's just looking at
right.
the facts of the situation and saying, this data tells a different story.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's, when rules like this come into play, the new rules get introduced, other rules get phased out depending on what the data is saying, depending on how things are being played out. But we can follow the data in that regard. And ultimately, again, like you said, ultimately the goal is to have the fairest, most equal system
Mhm.
that helps Americans as
Yeah.
much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. The goal would be to be in a world where we don't need all this regulation, right? I think everyone would like to have
Yeah,
that
sure.
world, right? It's just a matter of, are we there yet? And if not,
Right.
what measures do we need to be, to put in place to try to push back against the shortcomings that we
Right.
currently find ourselves living with, right? We're trying to combat that. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
all right, well, let's put a poll question out to the people. Do we want to ask then about an outright ban? Because I think if we say, should there be more restrictions? People are going to say yes,
Right.
generally, right? Maybe the question should be, should lobbyists be outright banned from making political contributions?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. So the poll question of the week
Was
is,
that it? Did you just
yeah,
do it?
that's pretty much it, right?
All
So
right, try
the
try to get
poll,
try to get.
the poll question of the week is, do you agree that lobbyists should be banned from making political contributions.
Okay. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see what that
Yeah. And again, it's one of those things where people hear lobbyists and they think it's like a dirty word, like, oh yeah, they should be banned from doing everything. You should put them in jail. That's how people are going to think, I think, right? Like
Sure,
emotional.
sure.
But I think you need to kind of define, okay, well then how do you classify a lobbyist, and does this infringe on
Right.
people's ability to engage with the process also? And does this, like we said, potentially have a chilling effect to where people aren't going to want to engage with the process, right? That they're afraid of losing their rights, let's say, right? Like if you're just
Right.
banning them, they're gonna be like, well, then I'm just gonna stay out. I don't want to be banned. So
Right. All right. Sounds good. Didn't get a chance to get up the poll question from last week, so I think next week we'll have two to
okay,
to go over.
we'll go over those two next week. So do we have a
Yeah.
bottom line for this week?
Do we have bottom line for this week?
Well, we kind of touched upon a few thoughts that could be bottom lines.
Well, go ahead, take it away. I've been kind of low energy this week because of my
Yeah.
sore throat, but
Oh,
yeah, it's
okay.
okay.
Low energy. Well, I think the bottom line is that broadly speaking, there is a lot of agreement across the board that we want a world, we want a system where regulations, restrictions, these types of measures don't need to be put in place because they're not needed, right? But I think there is disagreement as to where we are, right? How broken the system is, how much in need we are of putting these types of restrictions in place. And I think to answer those questions, we should try to take our emotions out and look at the data. What does the data say? What do the facts say, right? If we can just look at that, then we should be able to come to more of a consensus on what we need to do, because it isn't about even what we think anymore, what our personal opinions or feelings are. It's about what the information is saying that we're looking at, right? And so let's try to make more decisions based on data and input, and keep in mind that we all, I think, want to get to the same place. We want to get to a place where these things are not even needed. And so as we're putting measures in place, we also want to be moving towards a less corrupt, right, more ideal society. But if we can acknowledge that we're not there yet, then I think we do need to start looking into doing things, even if we think about them as temporary, right, band-aid solutions, just to kind of hold us over until we get to a place that is more aligned with what our ideals are, and that is consistent with what the data is showing us. So there you go.
Sounds like a good bottom line to me. I'm
All
with it.
right.
And so people can find us on YouTube at Nuance Show, as well as Facebook and Instagram, and everywhere podcasts are available.
Yes, that sounds good. As always, we thank you for tuning in. We've got work to do as always, and we'll catch you next time.